Hey guys, Mr. B here, and the number one question that I get from my math students is, when are we ever going to use math in the real world? And I thought of a way that I can explain all of the ways that you're actually going to use math when you grow up, and I want to share some of them with you and see what you think and get some ideas from you about how math is being used in some of these real world situations. So let's take a little virtual field trip here and see how it goes. Okay, so most of these houses on this street where I live are pretty new, and there is so much math that goes into this real world scenario of building a house. And so since they're still building a lot of houses close to where I live, as you can see way back there, they are building one, and then I think there's even another one over here. You can see they're building one. And so what I thought we would do is talk about all the math that it takes to get a house from nothing all the way built and finished out, like these houses that you see, and also like the house that you live in. So we're gonna take a little virtual field trip today in the neighborhood and check out the math that it takes to build a house. All right, so here we go. Okay, so when you're building a house, obviously there's different stages that you go through, and like the first stage is kind of like getting the ground level and ready to build the house on. That's a pretty important stage, because if you don't have that right, then everything else is going to go wrong. And then you pour the foundation of the house, which is the concrete that the house sits on, and then you frame the house, which is putting all the bones of the house together, or the wood structure that holds it up. And so that's another phase of building the house. And then after you get it framed, there's a ton of math involved that uses area, because you start to cover the house with all kinds of things. You cover the roof with shingles, so you need the area of the roof. You cover the outside walls with bricks or siding, so you need the area for that. Or you cover the yard with grass, you need area for that. Once you move inside, you cover the inside with insulation and sheetrock and paint. And so area is just all over the place when you're building a house. There's so much area involved in building a house. Volume too, really, because we live in a 3D world. Area is a two-dimensional thing. So even something as thin as a shingle, it's really volume because it's 3D, but you can see volume more when you talk about bricks and how many bricks it's going to take to cover a house and stuff like that. So area and volume are huge. Measurement obviously is huge when you're building a house. If you can't measure things correctly, you're not going to have straight walls. You're not going to have your rooms are not going to be shaped right if you can't measure things correctly. So measurement, area, and volume, and angles, having the right angles of different things so that everything matches up, those are huge important parts of being able to build a house. So if these workers didn't understand any of that stuff, then there would be some pretty ugly looking houses around here. So we're going to take a look at some of these things, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about as we go through and look at some. So a big thing is having nice level ground to build on. So as you see here where they're building all these houses, obviously the first thing that they had to do was to go in and actually remove some trees and get the ground nice and level. And you can see that this lot right here is completely level and completely ready to start putting the boards up so that they can pour the concrete. But they've got to do a lot of measuring here, because they don't want the house too far back, and they don't want the house too far forward. They don't want it too far to the side so that it hits this neighbor, or too far to the other side so it hits that neighbor. So there's a lot of measuring that needs to go on. And if you look closely, right kind of in the middle of that lot, there's a wooden stake in the ground with a little orange piece of plastic wrapped around it. That's the center. That's like the very center measurement. So when the guys come to put the boards up to pour the concrete, they can start to measure from there. So you can see like over here, they're putting these forms up right here. These guys don't even know it. They're about to be YouTube famous, but anyway, they're putting the forms up to pour this concrete right there, and they're using that stake in the middle as a measurement to do that. So once they get the forms up, they'll start doing what you see here, which is laying the plumbing in the ground. So you're going to want the plumbing done correctly, because you don't want plumbing pipes coming up in the middle of your living room floor or in the middle of your bedroom floor. So you've got to measure a lot of stuff correctly in order to make sure that those plumbing pipes come up in the bathroom where they're supposed to. So your sink is where it's supposed to be, and the bathroom sink, the kitchen sink, the toilets in the bathrooms, and the sinks in the bathrooms all have to be in the spot where you want them. So a lot of care has to be taken to mathematically measure and make sure those things are correct, so that everything works right when you move into your house and when your house is finished. And if the people building these things don't understand how that works, then you end up with a house that's got a lot of problems, and you don't want that. So I'm going to drive over here, and we're going to take a look at a house that they're about to pour concrete for the foundation, and it's right behind my house. So it's kind of like going to share the backyard fence with me. But what you're going to see is they have done a lot of work to the ground underneath the house where the foundation is going to be poured. They've run the plumbing pipes and everything, and then they've also got these blue looking cables that are going to be laying across the ground that you'll see, that are called post tension cables, and those help with the strength of the house. And they're set up in a grid. It's this one right here. They're set up in a grid, which is obviously very mathematical. But let's take a look and see the math we can find at this stage of a house being built. So here we go. You can see the grid here with those post tension cables that I was talking about. You can also see the grid built out of the dirt, so that way the concrete is going to go down in between each of these mounds and add more structure and add more strength to hold the weight of this house. And those blue cables that you see, that's not really the cable. The blue part is just a protective piece of plastic on it. But those cables actually look like this. And what they do is, once they pour the concrete, they pull those cables on the outside with a machine that pulls these cables tight, so they're not just kind of laying there loose. They're really tight and strong, and that adds strength. So that way, when the ground shifts, the concrete will move like this ever so slightly to keep it from cracking, because as houses get old and the dirt moves around, things shift out a little bit. And you can see something else here too. There's the back of my house right there. Like I was talking about measuring and having the plumbing come out where it's supposed to, you can see here, this is probably a little bathroom right here. That right there is probably plumbing for a sink or a toilet, and that right there is plumbing for a sink or a toilet too. And then if they don't have these things set in the right spot right now, then when they come in and pour that concrete later, it's a huge problem and very expensive to fix if they have to move that pipe or any of these other pipes that you see. So measuring is super important, that they get it done. You can see some things that they've done here. This little string right here is actually a measuring tool. They probably use that string to get this board in the right spot, because you can see how they match up there, and it's like that all the way down. So that string is helping them keep everything either parallel or perpendicular, keep everything at a nice 90-degree angle where they need it. So tons of math involved already, and this house hasn't even had the foundation poured yet, so it's pretty cool. So this house is being framed right here, and look at all the angles that's in that. I mean, you've got right angles everywhere, obviously, but then you've got some acute and obtuse angles all in that framework, just everywhere. So angles and measurement is a huge part of the framing process. If these guys didn't understand how angles work, then that house would look like it came out of a Dr. Seuss movie or something, or a Dr. Seuss book. It wouldn't have the straight sides and straight edges that it's supposed to have. So tons of math involved in the framing part of the house. Let's see if we can find one that maybe we can go inside and take a look. Here's one. Nobody's working on this one at the moment, so maybe we can go inside and check this one out. Before we even go in, you can kind of see here, you would need, think of the math involved to do these shingles right here. You would need to calculate the area of that. It's pretty much a rectangle, so you would need to calculate that area in order to get the right amount of shingles. And then it looks like this piece up there on the roof, for those up there, you would need to calculate the area of that triangle in order to get the shingles. And I mean, you're going to order way more shingles than you need if you're not calculating this stuff. So somebody somewhere along the way has to measure that and calculate those to make sure that they're ordering the right stuff. You would need to know the size of these windows before you order them so that you could get the right size windows. Just all kinds of stuff. Let's take a look inside, see if we can find some more math being used. All right. Doorway here. Doorway for what looks like a closet. If that's not measured right, the door's not going to fit. Electrical wire being run. You got to know the right amount of wire that you're going to need in order to get that ran where you want it to go. Same thing with these air conditioning lines. Those things have to be measured so that they run to the air conditioner unit that's in the attic. These lines here are gas lines, I believe, that are going to take gas over to the stove. This is just some sheeting that goes on the walls. Some of it's to protect against water damage and stuff like that. You would have to calculate area to get the right amount for each room that you're doing. Obviously the dimensions of the room you can see on the floor. When it's time to put carpet in this house, you're gonna have to calculate the area for this room, the area for the room that I'm standing in, and every other place that you want to put carpet or tile or whatever type of flooring that you want to use. Let's take a look at what else we got going on here. Just look at the shapes. Like this column that the fireplace is going in, that column is basically one giant triangular prism. It's huge. It's way bigger than anything we would use in math class to teach you about triangular prisms. But that's kind of cool. When you come and look at this kitchen area, this is going to be some type of an island in your kitchen, and the sink and stuff is going to be in there maybe. Well, no, not the sink, but some electrical is going to be in there. If they didn't measure correctly, it would be obviously in a weird spot. It would be either too far into the living room or maybe too far into the kitchen. So a bunch of math going on there to get that right. This is the plumbing that I was talking about earlier. You know, if the guys doing the plumbing had measured this wrong before they poured the concrete, then you might have the plumbing popping up over here in the middle of the room somewhere instead of being hidden in the wall where it's supposed to be. Actually, the first house that I bought after I got married, they did measure that wrong, and they had to come back and literally break open the concrete floor to move the pipes, which is not what you want. So you got to have people that know math and know what they're doing to figure this out. The stairs here gives you all kinds of angles going on the staircase, and looks like they got a bathtub already in up there. Let's take a look up the stairs and see what we can find up here. So this flooring is area. You would need to calculate the area so you know how many boards to put down for the upstairs floor. Oh, there's some volume for us right there. They're testing this bathtub out to make sure that it's not going to leak downstairs, and so they filled it with water, and they've got the stopper plugged up right there. So there's volume for you. They're testing out how much water that will hold and if it leaks or not. Oh man, just a ton of stuff everywhere. There's volume, believe it or not, in these air conditioner vents. How much air it moves. The system that you buy has to be able to fill the house with enough cold air, otherwise it's going to be hot all the time. So just interesting to see all the angles and all of the math involved in putting these things where they're supposed to go. This looks like part of the attic maybe inside this house. Tons more angles, tons more measurements that have to be made in order for this house to look right when they're finished. There's another bathtub right there that they're checking for leaks. Just amazing, all of the math that goes into building a house. These guys right here are doing area in the real world. He's putting shingles on that roof, and you can hear his nail gun popping the nails into the roof every time he puts a shingle down. And if you don't have the area of that roof calculated correctly, then the guys are going to run out of shingles. They won't have enough shingles, or you bought too many, more than you needed. So if you see all the different triangles and the different rectangles that roof is made up of, somebody has sat down and calculated the area of each one of those triangles and each one of those rectangles and added them all up so that they bought the right amount of shingles for that roof. So pretty cool. That's area in the real world right there. Here's a house that's pretty close to being finished, and I wanted you to look at this. It's rebar is what that metal material is that's in a grid, and that's what gives the concrete strength when they pour the concrete. But I mean, it's laid out in a mathematical grid, just like the coordinate plane is laid out with an X and Y axis. You can see how that is very similar into how that is laid out for this house. So another cool way of seeing math, and you might not have even known all that was underneath your concrete, but it is, and that's what gives it strength and keeps it from cracking and pieces of it breaking off. It keeps it all held together. Pretty cool. Also, when they pour the concrete, they're going to have to calculate volume. If they want that driveway, if they want enough concrete to fill that driveway, they're going to have to know the length and the width and the height, essentially, of what that driveway is. Now, I know that driveway's curved, and so it has some weird angles and things in it, but they still have to calculate the volume correctly so that they fill it with the right amount of concrete. More math in the real world. Pretty cool. So here we are back at my house, and I'm just going to show you that even more math when you get to the inside of a house is needed. You know, when you want to paint the walls, you're going to need the area the area of every wall in every room. When you do the floors, you're gonna need the area of the floor. When you do the molding along the bottom there, you're gonna need measurement of every kind. You're gonna have angles. You can see the different angles that they have to go around the bottoms of the walls. To do an archway, you're gonna need the right measurements because you don't want one side of the archway to be taller than the other side of the archway. If you do, it'll look weird. This window right here, you can't tell now, but this window on the left is actually about almost an inch, maybe about 3/4 of an inch higher than this other window because they built it wrong. You can't tell it now because when they put these trim pieces in for the blinds, they were able to adjust and move them a little bit so at the top those two corners kind of meet at the same level. But before those blinds were in there and you looked at it, you could definitely tell that it was off. So every house is not going to be perfect. There's always going to be some pieces that are off a little bit everywhere, but if the math is done correctly, then it'll be right from the beginning. So it's just neat to think about all of the math that's involved in a house. Same thing here. You have double doors. You want them to close correctly, then everything's got to be, the angles have to be 90-degree angles, and everything's got to be measured and set correctly. So much math inside of a house. I hope you enjoyed the virtual field trip and looking at the building process of a house and seeing how much math is involved in it. And leave a comment below, maybe if you see some areas of math that I missed that are involved in the process, or if this gets posted in your Google Classroom, maybe leave your teacher some comments about math that you see in the building process. But hopefully that answers part of the question of when are we ever going to use this math in the real world. Well, if you are going to live in a house or you're going to own a house, when you get older, you're going to want to know about the math that's involved in building a house, or just in maintaining the house that you live in, whether you build it or whether you buy one that's already built. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do some more virtual field trips since we can't be in the classroom right now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.